Recently, I've seen a couple of stories in print media in which questions like, how long should we grieve? Or what is the right amount of time to grieve a loss are being asked. I've actually been saddened by these questions because in so many ancient indigenous traditions, grief is seen and experienced very differently. In those traditions, grief is an ongoing, unfolding process. Questions like, what is the right amount of time to grieve a loss, belie the fear that this culture has with regard to grieving. We construct all kinds of notions about what will happen if we grieve too long because conscious grieving is so foreign to us. Unlike ancient traditions, grief has never been an acceptable part of our lives. Therapist and author Frances Weller speaks of developing an apprenticeship with sorrow. What on earth does he mean by those words? Well, if we think about the apprenticeship as it existed in the Middle Ages for craftsmen and artists, we realize that it was an ongoing process of learning from the master craftsman or artist so that one could become a master craftsman or artist. Occasionally, women were apprentices who learned how to be responsible for running a household of hundreds of people or making medicines and watching over the sick. Leonardo da Vinci became an apprentice by the age of 17, and Michelangelo became an apprentice when he was 13. The apprentice learned from and was guided by the master. Why? Because the apprentice had a deep desire to learn the craft or art form in order to make a living, but also to serve the community. Also, he or she spent years being taught by the master. Apprentices lived with the master, working in a kind of specialized servant arrangement where their labor was exchanged for food, lodging, and training for a set period of time. It was a very close professional but personal relationship in which the apprentice consented to be schooled in a very intimate manner by the master. So, what is an apprenticeship with sorrow? Frances Weller states, quote, "Our apprenticeship begins when we come to understand that grief is ever present in our lives. This is a difficult realization, but one that has the opportunity of opening our heart to a deeper love for our singular life and for the wind-swept world of which we are a part. We begin with the simple gesture of picking up the shards of grief that lie littered on the floor of our house. Nothing special, nothing heroic, not unlike young novices entering their apprenticeship with the master teacher. We begin humbly, sweeping the shavings, mixing the pigments, cleaning the brushes, tending the fires. We begin the process by building our capacity to hold sorrow in the womb of the heart. Through this practice, we become able to welcome the pervasive and encompassing presence of grief," unquote. In other words, grief is more than an emotion. It is also a faculty of being human. It is a skill that must be developed, or we will find ourselves migrating to the margins of our lives in hopes of avoiding life's inevitable entanglements with loss. It is through the skill of grieving that we are ripened as human beings. Grief invites gravity and depth into our world. We possess the profound capacity to metabolize sorrow into something medicinal for our soul and for the soul of the community. After years of walking alongside grief, we gradually come to see how we have been reshaped by this apprenticeship. What gradually emerges from this long apprenticeship is a spaciousness capable of holding it all: beauty and the loss, the despair and the yearning, the fear and the love. We develop a capacity to see into the sorrow and find there, in the depths of it all, something sacred, something eternal. And as a result, we become much bigger human beings with bigger hearts and generous compassion. And our apprenticeship patiently crafts a master, or in the language of our time, a wise elder. And paradoxically, the result is a solid core of joy at the center of our being. Happiness or unhappiness comes and goes, but the joy at our core is unmoved. And all of this from our apprenticeship with sorrow. We need our grief, and so does the world. In fact, it is our moral obligation to learn the skill of grieving. Joseph Campbell said, quote, "People say that what we're all seeking is a meaning for life. I don't think that's what we're really seeking. I think what we're seeking is an experience of being alive, so that our experiences on the purely physical plane will have resonance with our innermost being and reality, so that we actually feel the rapture of being alive," unquote. Consenting to develop an apprenticeship with sorrow is not becoming a master griever, but it is about becoming fully alive. And that is our greatest gift to the Earth community.